Hey everyone, I have an important update for you today. More detailed information has now officially come out regarding the ongoing Charlie Kirk murder case, which was that very tragic stabbing incident. There's a strong possibility that it involves conflicts over transgender issues. The conflict over transgender issues is one of the most important points of contention between the American left and right. Let's talk about this. I also want to take this opportunity to explain the issue of transgender rights to everyone and then share my own stance on it. Charlie Kirk, a conservative American commentator from Turning Point, was giving a speech at a university in Utah. When he was shot from a distance with a rifle, the wound was fatal. He was hit once in the carotid artery. The 22-year-old suspect, Tyler Robinson, has been arrested. He still hasn't revealed his motive, but he did write transgender on the bullet. He wrote something about the transgender issue on the bullet. Now, something has come to light. This has been confirmed. He was living with a partner who was in the process of transitioning from male to female. He is currently in a romantic relationship, and that person was originally a man and is undergoing gender reassignment surgery to become a woman. And the shell casings recovered by the police at the scene had symbols related to transgender issues. This whole situation seems to be what drove him to do this. To commit murder, to carry out an assassination, most likely because of something related to Charlie Kirk, though I can't confirm this right now. He said it was probably about gender issues involving Charlie Kirk. And these gender issues are indeed related, specifically to transgender issues. Kirk has been a strong critic of transgender people for years. He emphasizes that there are only two genders and denies the concept of gender fluidity. He believes that gender cannot be changed. The fact is, there are only two genders. We have two sexes, and people generally believe sex is fixed, but they think gender is not fixed. This is a progressive idea. Gender involves issues of identity. It is his stated belief that the modern concepts of transgenderism and gender fluidity are fundamentally harmful falsehoods that inflict significant damage on people and represent a form of abuse, particularly toward children. It harms people, and it basically hurts children. This position is that there is no such thing as transgender. There are only two genders, male and female. We say gender is just sex, but in English there are two words, sex and gender. Gender refers to identity. When it comes to gender, males, tend to like fighting, carrying guns, and seeking adventure, while women like to play with dolls. This view holds that gender and sex are different, and that there are many cultural factors involved. It all started with the book on the third gender, which was advocated by postmodernism. He fully supported Donald Trump's ban on transgender people serving in the military. He said, if you're Jeff but you feel like you're Jill, you can't serve in the U.S. military. Find something else to do. He excludes transgender people from serving in the military. He opposes transgender women participating in women's sports competitions and is against transgender women using women's changing rooms. He even insists on dealing with transgender people, transgender women, in the way it was done in the 1950s. If a transgender woman is in the women's changing room, he thinks she should be dealt with using methods from the 1950s and 60s. So what does that mean? In the 50s and 60s, if you were a man dressed as a woman and walked into the women's changing room, you'd get beaten up. That's basically what he's saying. You should beat them up. Kirk calls for a ban on gender-affirming care. Gender-affirming care So what is gender-affirming care? It means that if you're an adolescent and you're questioning your gender, some doctors will run tests, all sorts of tests, to see if you really have gender dysphoria and whether your gender identity is different from your biological sex. Then they'll suggest ways to support you in this situation, which might include taking some hormones to help you feel better, and LT, break time equals 0.5s/NGT, or even suppressing your male hormones for a period of time. And then, when you're older, performing gender reassignment surgery. Doctors who advocate for providing this kind of care to transgender people should face strict legal consequences. Anyone who talks to children, studies whether kids really have transgender tendencies, and considers whether medical intervention is necessary, is treated like they're at the Nuremberg trials, as if they're Nazi war criminals. So what does Kirk think gender is? He believes gender is determined by your biological characteristics at birth. God created man and woman, and monogamy is an unchangeable order. The evidence he presents is the Bible. He often quotes Leviticus 20:13, saying that if a man lies with another man. But if you're going to quote Leviticus, let me tell you, there's a lot more in there you could quote too. Just like with a woman, if two men do something detestable, that is, if a man has sexual relations with another man, they must be put to death, executed, and their guilt will be on their own heads. This is God's perfect law. There are complete laws about sexual matters opposing LGBT, not just against transgender people, but also against homosexuality. Let's look at both perspectives. The conservative stance is that gender is an objective biological reality, an unchangeable binary classification. If someone thinks gender is subjective, that gender is a matter of personal perception, and that it can be separated from objective biological sex, like someone born with male organs but believes they are female, or vice versa. It's considered a form of deception, a mistake. If you allow people to be transgender, it will confuse social order and undermine traditional family values, and bring about safety concerns leading to social chaos. So what actually happens in practice? First, a common argument from those who oppose transgender rights is that using changing rooms and washrooms that don't match their birth sex is seen as an invasion of others' privacy and safety, and that it's unfair for transgender women to compete with cisgender women because they supposedly have physical advantages. They are firmly against gender-affirming care for minors, believing it misleads and harms children. The goal of society, in their view, is to uphold tradition, to protect the existing social order and values. They firmly believe that gender and sex are inseparable. On the progressive side, the view is that gender and sex are different. Gender and sex are not the same. Gender is a subjective, internal identity, not limited to biology, but rather a matter of self-identification, what gender a person feels they belong to. Therefore, there are many, many genders because with gender identity, you can be male, female, male to female, female to male. You can be both male and female at the same time, or neither male nor female. This view emphasizes that gender and biological characteristics are different, and that this is part of human diversity, which should be affirmed and supported. You shouldn't suppress people because it causes them a lot of pain. They believe that society's rigid definitions of gender, like if someone isn't a good man, you mock him and try to force him to become a good man again, or you expect women to go back to playing with dolls and forbid them from playing soccer, are what lead to historical oppression and cause psychological pain, and tragedy for transgender people. As a result, these people end up with psychological issues and suffer greatly. They argue that transgender people should be allowed to use facilities that match their gender identity in order to protect their basic human rights and freedoms. For example, if a transgender person, a man who has become a woman, is told, "No, you have to go back to the men's side," then when she sees other men, she would feel very awkward, and she would also feel violated. So, which changing room she prefers to use should be up to her own choice. They emphasize dividing sports categories based on individual identity and call for the creation of more inclusive sports policies. This has sparked a lot of heated debate. Donald Trump even banned some states to allow transgender people to participate in competitions. He said that if this happens, he would cut off their education funding. They support providing gender-affirming care under professional medical guidance, especially for minors. If a minor has doubts, it should be handled by professionals. And then make a smoother transition, aiming to correct historical injustices, the unfair treatment of transgender people in the past. The goal is to build a more inclusive and equal society. There's no point in oppressing people, and there's no point in forcing someone to be a man or a woman. Our society should ensure that no one faces discrimination or develops psychological issues, because that poses a serious threat to society. Is that clear to everyone? Those are the arguments. Now, let me share my own points. First, gender is biologically binary. This is a basic fact. The genders we humans have defined are a binary system because males and females represent two different reproductive strategies. Throughout history, many organisms have tried multiple genders, but in the end, the most reasonable outcome has always been binary genders. So our design is fundamentally binary. You can't say this isn't true. So what is a male? He adopts a throwing stones into a bamboo forest strategy, throwing out lots of sperm, trying to have as many children as possible. Females, on the other hand, use a strategy that values quality over quantity. The egg is actually the only cell visible to the human eye. In fact, eggs are quite large compared to sperm, which are very small. With this particular kind of cell, women will often take the careful approach of thinking, I don't necessarily need a great many of them, but I will absolutely do my very best with what I have, because it's considered to be so incredibly precious, and so we do our absolute utmost to carefully protect it, so that it can survive. Men, on the other hand, take risks. So these are two completely different reproductive strategies. Men are aggressive and take chances. If they're successful, they can have many children. A woman's reproductive ability, on the other hand, is extremely valuable. She has to do her best to protect the small child she gives birth to because she has invested a lot to help them grow up. These two reproductive strategies are inseparable. You can't deny either one, because the strategies are different. The entire human body that results is different. The human body really is different, and that's the foundation. But with such a huge population of billions, this system often makes mistakes. For example, how do you determine if someone is male or female? If you try to explain it using religion, it sounds pretty ridiculous. There are actually 3 different ways to define it, and physiologically, there are 3 different standards. One way, which we've used for thousands of years, is to go by genitalia. You look at someone's genitals. If they have them, they're considered male. If not, they're not female. But there are people who have both male and female genitalia at the same time. And then there are people who have neither male nor female genitalia, and some are born with male genitalia. But sometimes the male genitalia shrink and the female genitalia develop instead. So this way of dividing by sex often leads to misidentification. The second method is to look at the XY chromosomes. Men have XY chromosomes, women have XX chromosomes. But the important thing to understand is an individual's genital characteristics can actually differ from their underlying chromosomal ones. So who do you listen to? There was a time when we said we should go by chromosomes, but are chromosomes really the final word? Not at all. Not at all. You can have male XY chromosomes, and as you grow up, like me now, I have very little male hormone, almost no androgens, and a lot of female hormones. Your body ends up looking like a woman's. I stopped building muscle. You really need a lot of male hormones for that. That's the only way you'll develop muscle, because you need to fight hard. Your reproductive system is designed for that. So we need male hormones to grow a lot of muscle. Now the Olympics use a third standard at this moment in your body. They look at the ratio of your male and female hormones to decide whether you're considered male or female. These three things are different. Physical characteristics, chromosomes, and hormones are all different, so what do? It's true that our foundation is so broad. We have ended up with a significant number of variations, and that's because the entire system is inevitably bound to have some margin of error. So what do we do when these errors occur? I absolutely disagree. If there really are discrepancies, and there definitely are people like that. If someone is biologically male but firmly believes they're female, and you force them to live as a man, the result could be that person committing suicide or becoming a deranged killer. Or if it's a woman, and you force her to live as a woman when she actually wants to be a man, and you don't let her transition. Right? If these people truly feel this way so strongly, they should be respected. They absolutely should not be stigmatized. There aren't that many people. Traditionally, transgender or trans people make up just over 1%. Now, in some places, it's gone up to 3% or 4%. This is a deviation that has appeared in our system. I don't agree that being transgender is something caused by teachers misleading students. Why is that? Intersex people have existed since ancient times, and even animals have them. This is something innate. Being persuaded by others to change your gender. Are you kidding me? Especially since gender transition is a painful and difficult process. It's impossible to be influenced by outside forces. If someone says a couple of things to you, oh, you can become a woman, would you go and become a woman? Let me ask, is there homosexuality in this world? I mean, is there really homosexuality? Am I saying I'm gay? No, that's not it. If a man touches me or kisses me, I get goosebumps. That's not something you can teach someone. It's not something that can be influenced, especially when it comes to being transgender. It's an equally painful process. Elon Musk thinks his eldest son became a daughter because of leftist ideology in education, but that's just too naive. Fourth, gender-related surgeries and hormone treatments are irreversible decisions. There's no way this can be done when someone is a child. You have to wait until adulthood. You can't even drink alcohol before you're 18, so how could you possibly decide your gender? You have to go through strict assessments before proceeding. There's absolutely no way this should be done during childhood. This creates a contradiction, and why is that? Let me tell you all, why do they want to implement this during childhood? If it's not done during childhood, the situation is actually like this. Our bodies are female bodies, but if you have a Y chromosome, it's present in your life, and when you add some androgens into the mix. When androgens are introduced, your body undergoes changes. You become much taller, bigger, and your physical strength is on a whole different level. There was once a case where the world women's boxing champion wanted to fight a man. In the end, even when she fought an amateur male of the same weight class, he still beat her. Because our entire bodies are built for heavy labor, for hunting, for fighting, with the hope of bringing back more women and having more children. Women's bodies, on the other hand, are designed to be safer. They have higher pain tolerance and endurance to protect their children. The two body structures are fundamentally different. That person, even as a child, without any hormonal intervention, would already grow into a 6.5-foot tall man. If you try to transition him at that point, his body is still fundamentally built as a man's body. So they say, this won't do. How can you have a 6.5-foot tall woman? That's not going to work. It's better to start adjusting hormones when they're in their teens. By regulating their hormones, you can make their body resemble a female's body, or in the case of a female, make her body resemble a male's body, and then only undergo gender transition when they're older. This is an irresolvable contradiction, but I am absolutely opposed to starting gender adjustment at a very young age. This is a highly controversial issue because it's very easy for a person to be unsure whether they identify as a man or a woman. They can be indecisive and things might change when they grow up. Based on the same principle in sports competitions. I am absolutely against men claiming to be women in order to compete, because the physical strength of both sides is actually very different. If you think that person's body is male, but they consider themselves female and can compete with women, then you might as well not have separate men's and women's divisions. If you don't separate men's and women's divisions, is that okay? Men would win everything. Men's muscles and speed are simply not comparable. That really is just not comparable at all, so I'm against it. Those people may enjoy sports. Then let them do sports. You can create a separate division for them to compete in, right? Just like people with disabilities have their own division to compete in. You can't have people with disabilities compete against able-bodied people. As for the washroom issue, if that's the case, you should just, if you want to accommodate these people, make all gender washrooms just individual stalls, to put it simply, even though that does waste some space. But if you have someone over 6 feet tall, who was born male but identifies as a woman, in the women's changing room, I can't accept that either, okay. Society absolutely needs to consider the needs of transgender people, not persecute them, and let them live comfortably, as well as uphold the principles of fairness and public safety. Transgender people have indeed existed throughout thousands of years of culture. This has caused countless tragedies. Thailand has the largest number of transgender people, where many become ladyboys. This is not encouraged by progressive Western culture. In India, many people have become eunuchs to live as women. This has existed throughout history, from ancient times to the present. We should have sympathy for these people and not discriminate against them, but we also need to respect the feelings of others in society. That's my view.